In secondary school, in high school for me, I had English classes and we were required to read fiction, certain fiction books, which the teachers thought that we should know and discuss in class. And by and large, I didn't enjoy these books and I didn't enjoy the discussion. I didn't really see the point of it. And I tried not to read the books if I could and yet still do well in the class, which is a feat in and of itself. And then when I went to university, I was required to take another course in modern literature. And I looked at it and I thought, well, this is going to be boring, but I don't have a way around it. And yet, for some reason, that teacher was able to unlock for me the value of reading these fictional works, which in a way that I hadn't yet understood. And I went back and I looked at my notes this morning for that class, and I found this paper that I wrote in the year 2000, and a quote from the teacher, which he said on the first day, which I have long since forgotten, but here it is engraved in ink, which really is, I think, the key that unlocked it for me. He said, "The complexity of life can sometimes be more encompassed in story." Hey everybody, welcome to the Sanctus Forum. I am Michael Stewart Robb, better known as Mike. On this channel, we do books and everyday spirituality, and that means we do life. We do life with God. I'm a theist. Now, of course, you can get a lot of life talk out of nonfiction books, and I read lots of nonfiction books, and possibly you read lots of nonfiction books, but what about these fiction books? Why read anything in fiction? Isn't this just entertainment? And I've got other ways to be entertained, and so I don't need fiction. Well, that's what I'd like to think about today. Why give your time to fiction, and in particular to novels? Now, there's lots of different kinds of literature, and some I know better than others, but they're, poetry and short stories and plays, and even if you get into literary nonfiction like memoirs and essays and all of that, lots of things that we could be reading which aren't strictly, hey, tell me how it is, nonfiction, just upfront teaching. So I've got some ideas that I think have helped me understand what novels could be. And the first is just an observation that most people get their life teaching from stories. And now they may not be getting them from novels. Maybe they are getting them from novels, and they may not be getting them from very highbrow novels, but they might be getting them from things like movies, which are narrative form. They're kind of like short stories with a kind of more breadth in the middle of them, and yet they are teaching people a lot of very important things, like what's of value, what should the main characters be going after, what's right and wrong, what is human nature like, how do people change, and they're picking up life lessons from these stories. They may not even be watching Oscar-winning movies. They may be watching Marvel movies, which I'm currently watching with my kids on the weekend, and sure enough, they teach about life. Now, if you want to step up that story-based life teaching to a novel, I wouldn't recommend starting with something like Moby Dick. Even though you have probably heard of it, I would start with something that's contemporary, that's probably published in the last 30, 40 years. You want it to be speaking your language, and I would look for something you think might be enjoyable, whether that's going to be a love story, whether that's a mystery, an adventure, whatever. When I was in high school, I read, Jurassic Park and that kind of stuff, and that's what I enjoyed. And the only thing that I would say is look also for those teachings on life. What does the author think is important? What kinds of things is this author saying about human nature and how we ought to live? A second reason for reading novels is their value for money. I realized this pretty early on when I didn't have a whole lot of money as a young adult, that I could buy a novel for $10, $15, and I would sit there with it for 20 plus hours, 30 plus hours. And whereas if I spent that same amount of money on going to a film in the cinema, I was done after 2-3 hours. You go back home, time is over. Or you go to a concert, you're paying, I don't know, 50, 100, 200 for really big acts, and again, 3-4 hours, you go back home. Sporting events, same thing, 100 spent, and then after 3-4 hours, you're back home. Whereas a book, a novel, you just pay your one time 15, and then you can read it for 30 hours or more, and then you can read it again like 3-4 years later. In fact, you don't even have to spend any money. You get it from the library, and your time is spent on something fairly enjoyable, again, assuming you're reading something that's at your level, and you've hardly spent any money at all. A third reason that novels can be important for us is that our soul needs beauty. You're going to have to find ways to nourish your life with beautiful things. Now, you can go out and go hiking and be in wonderful landscapes, but they're a lot harder to reach. I mean, not all of us live in the middle of some mountainous landscape or in the wilderness. I live in the middle of a city. You can go and spend time with great architecture in buildings that are very well designed, and you can go to a gallery and look at paintings, lots of different ways to find beauty, but they're all less accessible. They all require a good bit of effort, and that may be necessary. And I'm not discounting the fact that there are lots of little small things that we can enjoy: a good cup of coffee, a nice pleasant room that we can sit in and relax in, just spending time with children, relatives, people that are close to us. But to get a quick connection to beauty, novels can be one of the fastest and cheapest ways to do that, because they live right next to us and we can open them up and be in that other world and let that author, through words, share beauty with us. In fact, for most of history, poetry was the main way in which most people had access to beauty, because poetry is extremely portable and extremely cheap. And finally, fourthly, truth and life can be better communicated sometimes through fiction. And this is probably the one that most people need to hear. They need to hear that there are certain things that we need to know that nobody can just tell us. It needs to be told to us in all the complexity and nuance that a story can communicate. And yet nobody can just say it to us. You can't put it in literal words. It needs to be put together in a kind of all-encompassing story. And that's one of the things that I have learned to appreciate about novels, about fiction, is that life can be shared with me, different perspectives can be shared with me, ones that I don't necessarily even agree with, in a more full way than what can be done through a nonfiction book. Well, if any of you start reading some novel on the basis of this video, then let me know. I would appreciate knowing whether I'm actually getting through to anybody or whether I'm just entertaining myself. We will see you next time. According to this, I read The Scarlet Letter for the second time and wrote, "It is now one of my favorite books."